bass to start though. We're set up way off of this point. Some rock at the end of it, a bunch of grass up on top. And these guys are just sitting right up on top. We're getting to that time of year where these fish are done spawning and they're pretty much just waiting for the bait to move out deep. The bluegills are just wrapping up their deal and they're starting to make their way to the weed line. And we're just kind of picking off some of the early guys here that are making their way out deep. And so we're set up in like 23 feet of water, staying way off of it, and I'm making bomb casts up into the wind, just spot locked here. And I guess I'm gonna grab a new bait quick, but we'll go over kind of what this whole setup is. So, like I was saying, we're spot locked way off of this underwater point, making long casts. And what we got going on here is we're using this new TargetLock. So I'm able to hit spot lock, we have a little bit of wind today, and still move my live imaging transducer left or right or wherever I want it. And I'm actually just following fish around with this, which is really cool, because typically in the past I've had my Mega Live transducer mounted onto the shaft of my trolling motor. And then once I hit spot lock, I can't really do anything with it because that trolling motor is constantly moving around, keeping me in one place. Where with this TargetLock now, I'm able to move this thing left to right and line up my casts and actually line up fish to catch. So really cool feature. It just allows me to fish a little bit more efficiently and make better casts and get my bait on fish. Jumper. Not a little guy, but as far as bait selection goes today, this is a cool little deal. It's just your Tokyo rig, but it has a longer drop on it, which is super, super nice, especially around grass. We've shot a lot of underwaters of the original Tokyo rig, and it just seems like that drop sometimes isn't long enough. It brings the bait down into the grass, where with this little bit longer one, it keeps that bait just above that little bit of grass. Usually sandgrass or something like that grows just for a couple inches on the bottom, and this thing just gets it out of that and keeps it presentable to the bass. Here we're kind of in the middle of the grass flat. Over here is deeper water. You can see where this mud line starts. We're in the middle of the grass here, and then here's this inside line where this rock is, and then this is just the tip top of the point right here. So these fish are positioned on this inside weed line, sitting on the rock. If you transition up to here, again, you can see it. We're in grass, grass, grass. Here's that inside weed line, and these are all fish. So what I'm guessing is happening is these bluegills are a little bit earlier on than we thought. They're probably still kind of sitting on some bluegill beds, just getting off, but they're still fairly shallow. So these fish are sitting in about 10 feet, which in a couple weeks, they'll probably transition as those bluegills get deeper as the water warms up. These fish will pull out into like 15 to 20 feet. But right now, bluegills are still shallow and the bass are going to be near them. There he is. What do we got? Little bass. Just switch spots, same sort of deal though. There's some rock up on top, leads into some grass. These fish are just kind of positioned on the inside. Both spots that I've fished, I've kind of stayed downwind, casting into the wind. The way that this is positioned, the rock comes out like this, kind of perpendicular to the wind. So it can be kind of tough to fish sometimes. But what I've done is I've actually placed the TargetLock pointing directly at the wind, and then I'm able to fish this way, and I'm kind of able to see, because my trolling motor is going to be pointed working out from this rock spine, but I'm able to actually point my TargetLock into the wind and keep looking around. Little bass. Little bass. Go ahead and hit spot lock here. It seems like they're starting to group up a little bit. So what I'm gonna do, hit spot lock. I'm gonna take this guy, point it back to where I just caught that fish, get right back in there. That's one thing that you weren't really able to do before when having the transducer mounted to the shaft of the trolling motor, is once you hit spot lock, that inhibits your ability to use that forward-facing sonar because your trolling motor is moving around all the time. Rod reel today, pretty much just your typical offshore setup. 7/6 medium heavy rod. I like a little bit longer rod when fishing offshore. Number one, that's a little bit nicer one. Number one, you can make a little bit longer casts. And then number two, when I have my bait way out there, I'm able to get a really good hook set at a further distance. Fast gear ratio reel, this is an 8:3:1. 17-pound test, fluorocarbon. Just your typical setup, offshore, Texas rig, Carolina rig, Tokyo rig, doesn't really matter. But just something that you can get the bait out away from the boat and then be able to set the hook good. So we'll get this guy back. All right, so now that I've caught a couple here, being able to move this around, yeah, it works pretty good. But actually, one thing that is really incredible is both of these fish came kind of off of this point that I can see on the outside of my 360 here. So I'm gonna hold that down, hit target lock, and now I don't have to move this with the foot stomp switch. This guy is going to, because of GPS, it's going to keep locked on this point here, kind of where those fish came from. And so I'm gonna be able to get a look at what's on this point, looking at my Mega Live at all times, and it's gonna stay on that. Sometimes if the spot lock goes a little bit left or a little bit right, if we get a gust of wind, it'll push my Mega Live one way or the other. But now that I have target lock on, it'll kind of adjust and stay on that point. So you're able to do that with you know, any kind of structure that you might find if you're fishing a ledge, or you know, you have a brush pile mark, cane pile, a big boulder, that sort of deal. You're able to hit target lock on that object and it'll stay on the object at all times, which is really cool. No matter where you go, you can make a full 360 around the, let's say the brush pile, the rock. That target lock is going to stay on that at all times. So you're able to see the fish no matter where you go. As far as why I'm using a tube today, you know, when I think of fishing a tube, I think more of smallmouth fishing, but it actually works really, really well in grass for largemouth. This whole system, especially on a Tokyo rig like this, it's super, super slender. It gets in and out of the grass really good. And on top of that, it looks like a bluegill, especially the size bluegill that are in this fishery at this time of year. You know, you kind of pair all those features up and you have a bait that works really, really well for this time of year on the weed line.